Hi everyone, Dimitri here, Pornography Addiction Recovery Coach. I am making this quick message. It's a reply to Daniel, who sent a message in the group, and it was a detailed message about his situation, where basically he acknowledges or identifies as a hypersexual, and he has a history with partners in pornography, but he was still watching pornography when he had partners, even if those partners were themselves hypersexual or sexually active. And so he was wondering what was happening in that case, what he would potentially do that. So I've taken a few notes on his message here, and I'm just addressing these messages. If you guys want to do that, if you want to you write a few lines about yourself and there's a few questions you'd like to ask as well, it's my absolute pleasure to answer your questions and look into your situation in a bit more detail if that can bring some help. So Daniel says, I remember my first sexual fantasies when I was 6, 7 years old, or a sexual activity. It was the same for me as well. I can remember primary school, probably 8 years old. I had curiosity towards sex. I kind of knew there was already the stigma around sex, kind of knew it was bad to do that, and I had this interest. So yeah, hypersexuality starts young, that's for sure, and we'll get to that in a second. I've got other outlets, but I still go towards pornography. Yes. Is it still hypersexual if you have someone who you trust and love, you can express yourself openly and sexually with, but you still use pornography? And why would I do that? So what I'm hearing, Mike, mine was curiousness, was age 8. Yes, thank you for sharing, Mike. Absolutely. So we can see we all had some sexual interest around 6, 7, 8. Yeah, this period is classified as non-sexual in traditional psychoanalysis, and it is obviously not true at all. That's when genuine sexual curiosity starts to happen. Why would you do that? Why would you engage in pornography when you have someone who's a satisfying sexual partner? Well, there is something that tells me that this partner is not sexually satisfying, or there is something that you find in pornography that cannot be found with that partner. Whether they're hypersexual or not. If you're both vanilla, it's a good match. If you're hypersexual, they're hypersexual, you're a good match. If you're more hypersexual than them, there'll be a mismatch, and you'll need to compensate for that. So what is it that pornography could bring you that a partner cannot bring you, even though they're completely open and connecting? The first thing could be some fantasies that are technical and that are technical or repressed or difficult to bring on the table, that are more easily consumed in pornography than in reality, or put into place in reality. Mike, pornography is damaging, and how can it be stopped? On that topic, Mike, I have created a whole masterclass that can help you answer this question, so I'll post the link to the masterclass at the bottom of this video in the comment section. Thank you for asking, and love your enthusiasm and curiosity. So it could be fantasies that are not easily implementable. It could be connection. It could be the fact that connection is a problem. It could be that you want a space where it's sexual and you don't want connection. And why is that? I've had this problem before, and I had a few clients who had this problem before, where they come to me and they say, my girlfriend is too perfect and I can't express myself with them because they don't allow me to come up, and they're too perfect and I can't be as good as them. And it's not the case. It's that this person doesn't allow your shadow to come to the surface, and is constantly pushing down the shadow back into repression, and so you can't express your shadow with them, and so you'll feel always inadequate and suppressed. So it's not that they're too perfect, it's that they're too good and they don't allow their shadow to come up, or they don't have a shadow that's very strong, so your shadow is not welcome to the table. And pornography can be a good space for your shadow to come out in this case. There was another reason. There were 3 reasons that I had in mind. What's the third one? Connection. Yeah, just pure sexual energy, just time. Sometimes, your partner got a headache, got a broken leg, whatnot, and you just can't have sex. So there's this absence of need for permission in pornography. Permission is granted right away, and you don't need to ask, you just do it. So it removes the human factor. So I guess what I'm hearing here and what I'm saying is that what you're looking is less connection and less human factor and more efficient sex processing stuff. So I don't know, Daniel, had a lens, you can tell us when you see that video. And so why would I do that? Yes, we just answer that. Probably to desire to have less connection or just have this constant sexual world that's open 24/7 with no repression whatsoever. I wonder what common personality traits or coping mechanisms there might be that are common with people who are hypersexual. And so, Micah, this may speak to you as well. So the answer to that is not a happy answer, but there is definitely one common trait, and that trait is carrying a wound. That trait is using sexuality as escapism from pain, or trying to find healing from that wound in sex, and failing at doing so. And so we keep trying and we keep failing, and so we're addicted, or we're hypersexual. People in some sex positive communities will tell you that there's nothing wrong with being hypersexual. Well, that's true. There's nothing wrong with being hypersexual. I agree with that. But they tell you that these hypersexualities and these imbalances don't come from a place of hurt. They come from a place of creativity and enjoying life. And I agree with that. But it's just when it comes to the point that it becomes a problem and that hypersexuality comes to be a problem, that then it's not a thing about being creative anymore, because you're not going to paint a painting if it damages your life. You'll do it because it makes your life better. So creativity helps to make your life better. But if this creativity comes and become obsessional, it's not creativity anymore. There's some hurt in the back. So the hypersexuality can come from a place of trauma. It can come from a wound. It can come from attachment issues. I just put that in the big baggage of wounds and trauma, and it varies from person to person, but they will create that. And the question I want to ask you, and I'm going to reply, is that why is sexuality the realm of all the big drama? Why is sexuality the easiest avenue when there is trauma, and that it just fragments or manifests into our sexual universes? And so if we think about trauma, in trauma there is some needs that have not been met, or some abuse that's happened, so boundaries that have not been enforced. And if you think about it, as a child, we have our boundaries and needs that are constantly being met by other people. We're heteronomous. We're dependent upon other people, but as we grow as adults, we become autonomous. But the only need that cannot be met by someone else than us is sex. And you can masturbate, you can do all the things, but behind sex, the need is to reproduce and pass your genes onto someone else so you can reproduce and pass your genes for prosperity. And in the animal realm, some animals would go as far as dying just for that instinctual desires passing their genes and surviving in this genital way in the environment. So there is that calling, and the only way to do that is to have someone else interfere in the process. We need permission for sex to happen and this passing of genes to happen. And that's why all the problems that are happening, most of them happen in the sexual world, because it's the only thing that as an adult you need permission from someone else to fulfill, and it's also a deep need. So we have this deep need that we need to fulfill, and we need to ask permission, and it's so excruciating at times and fulfilling at other times. So yes, common personality traits, coping mechanisms. It's a wound that hasn't been processed adequately. So what are possible solutions for that? Reprocessing the trauma, being open into sex-positive communities and connecting with people who are also hypersexual. Daniel had a strong point in saying that he could meet all the hypersexual people he wants, but there would still be that desire, that lack of fulfillment. So I think it doesn't come from a place of connection. Like we must acknowledge that we want sometimes also to come from a place of connection and et cetera, et cetera. But the shadow doesn't care about connection. The shadow cares about having its needs met, being heard, and doing the things. So sometimes having no connection is a lot easier. And that's why we get to objectify people. That's why we get to, in some fantasies, there's always an element of non-consent in any fantasy, because the shadow needs to express itself. And so it's going to bypass any consent that's required so that their desires are fulfilled. Okay, so this is kind kind of what's coming up for me. I could go on for hours on this, but yeah, that's a short answer. So I'm curious into how this lands for you. Exploring this topic of hypersexuality. Okay, and on the topic of addiction, we can either deal with the addiction and look back in the past at the trauma that's happened and heal that. We can look at the present and see how we're consuming pornography and changing that so that it becomes less addictive and playing with the parameters so that it breaks the addiction cycle. Or we can look into the future and changing our environment to open ourselves into a sex positive world and being in communities where our sexual desires are heard and understood and finding someone that matches those desires. So these are the three pillars of a healing that I use. Mental representations to heal from trauma, behavior to heal from addiction, and environment, sex positive communities to express our sexual selves in a way that's non-repressed and enjoyable. So if you'd like to know more, I've created a masterclass as per requested by Mike. I will attach the link below. That's my reply to Daniel. If you have any other question you'd like me to answer, it's my absolute pleasure. If you want us to look into your situation in a bit more detail, it's my absolute pleasure to answer your questions. Thank you guys. Take care and have fun.